I'm going to start off, as I said, by talking you through the purpose of a grant application, because I think understanding its purpose will really help you craft it. So, firstly, what is a research grant application? Well, it is not a research paper. It's not a research protocol. That's very much how you operationalize your research project. And it's not an ethics application. So, it's different from all of those things. It is, in fact, an application for money, as I'm sure you're aware. It is competitive, which I'm sure you're aware. And it's basically, therefore, a sales pitch. You are competing with other people for a pot of money. So there's no point really just sitting there in a fairly, relaxed way saying, well, this is what I plan to do. I know it's interesting. You actually have to shout about it a bit. You have to draw people's attention to the really excellent aspects of the research that you're doing, why it's important, why it should be taken seriously, and why at the end of the day, people should part with quite a lot of money to fund you to do it. So you must take your reader on an easy to understand, logical journey aimed at convincing them to spend thousands or indeed millions of pounds on you and your project. So it's quite a big ask. Therefore, you want to do a good job. So a research grant application is a sales pitch aimed at convincing a particular funder that your idea is important enough to them. Note, your suggested approach is good enough that what they will get will be good value for money, and your team are expert enough to successfully deliver the work. So what does a research grant application look like? This is just a fun analogy, really, of a plane here. But a research grant application will consist of lots of different parts. And in fact, each one supports the other. So, if your propeller drops off, then your plane is going to crash. This is an example of the up-to-date stage 2 NIHR application. It's very similar to the sorts of information that you'll be asked for with other funding bodies. They'll just structure it in different ways. And I know some funding applications can be quite bitty and confusing. But these are, broadly speaking, the things that you'll be expected to deliver. So firstly, some summary details, information about who the leads and co-leads and co-applicants are, some administrative details, a scientific abstract. In the NIHR, this doesn't really appear until stage 2. All the more important, therefore, the plain English summary that you submit at stage 1. Any changes from previous stage. Working with people and communities. This is their PPI section, so it's now changed to working with people and communities. And then a detailed research plan, which for the NIHR includes the background and rationale, the aims and objectives, the methodology, and the rest of the plan. Knowledge mobilization, dissemination, and impact. So these are their headings. So that's basically, dissemination, outputs, what happens next. Project management, intellectual property, and commercialization. There'll also be a section on the budget, which obviously you will be working through with your R&D people. And the SOCAP form, which basically is a breakdown of the different sorts of costs, which you'll go through with your regional research network. Delivery network. And then there'll be some uploads, importantly, things like flow diagrams, Gantt charts, etc., and something on acknowledgement and acknowledgement of various things and conflicts. So all these things have to hang together in a flyable way. Just to say, I will draw on quite a few presentations today on this particular book, the Research Funding Toolkit, which is by Aldridge and Darrington. It was a bit of an eye-opener for me when I read it, and it did make me look at grant applications in a very different way. What they say is that a general principle of grant writing is that you should give the reader the information that they want when they want it. And that sounds quite simple, but actually it's not always. They say there are 4 key propositions that funders are looking for. The importance proposition, so a demonstration that the project is important. The success proposition, that the project can answer the question, so you've got your methodology right. The value proposition, so this project is good value for money. And the competence proposition, so this team can deliver. And basically, when you're writing a grant application, everything you include should support one or more of these propositions. So what is a good research idea? Well, firstly, it should be novel. So we're not flogging a dead horse. It should be important, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It should be useful. and it should be researchable. So it's something that you can actually research. But important to whom? It has to be important to the funder's remit. And it's very tempting, I think, when we have our own specific, exciting areas of research to think, well, everyone will be interested in this. But it's not actually the case. And there's no point crafting a brilliant research grant application if it doesn't fit the funder's remit. So where do you find out about what they fund? Well, there will be a mission statement somewhere. There'll be aims and objectives of the funder that they'll describe on their websites. You can look at the projects that they funded in the past. You can look at their eligibility criteria and their guidance notes, and you can find out whether what you're pitching to them is actually something that they're interested in. Will the proposed study answer the question? So they'll be looking at the research plan. Will it deliver? Is the plan appropriate and scientifically rigorous? Is it feasible? And at the end of the day, will it deliver useful outputs? Will the work be good value for money? So again, if you're asking for £10 million, they'll want to know that it's absolutely justified. And indeed, there will be discussions at panel level if things are looking too pricey. If they've set a funding limit, then stick within it. And if you are asking for vast amounts of money for something a bit odd, massive bit of equipment or something, it has to be very clearly justified. Are you a credible applicant? So this is important. You need to apply for award at the right level for you in terms of your background, expertise, and track record. So, for example, if you're an early career researcher, you won't be going for a program grant for applied research, but you may well be going for a research for patient benefit or a fellowship. So it's getting that right. Do you have a team to cover all the major methodological and other relevant areas? They'll want to know that if there's a massive chunk of statistics or it's a clinical trial, that you have the relevant people involved. If they don't feel the team can deliver, they won't fund your project. And obviously, you do need to have institutional support. There are issues of sponsorship and responsibilities, research governance responsibilities, which have to be covered appropriately. So a research grant application is a competitive sales pitch aimed at convincing a particular funder that your idea is important to them, your suggested approach will successfully deliver something meaningful, that what they will get will be good value for money, and that you and your team are eligible for funding and competent to undertake the work. But even if you have all of these things, an important question, a successful project plan, good value for money, and you're credible, unless you can convey all these things to funders, reviewers, and panels through your writing, you will not get funded. You may say, well, they'll interview me. Well, they don't half the time. So if you're doing a fellowship or an invention for innovation grant, you may ultimately get an interview, but not until they've looked at your stage one or your early application, which is all based solely on writing. And there's a big difference between having the idea and actually presenting the idea. And that's what this course is all about. So like a picture, research grant application should not be jumbled up, unclear, difficult to decipher, confusing and unconvincing. It should be clear, unambiguous, easy on the eye, easy on the brain, and a convincing read. What we see at the Research Support Service, a few brilliant ideas, brilliantly crafted, an awful lot of brilliant ideas, perhaps not perfectly crafted. So they could actually craft them better and sort out various sections. We see a few bad ideas brilliantly crafted, and you'll be surprised at how far they get. And we see a few ideas which aren't very good and are poorly crafted. But it's that top left-hand corner that we're, sorry, the top right-hand corner that we're talking about. Note, it doesn't matter how well your grant application is presented if you have a poor research question, you're not in scope for the funder, your team are not qualified to do the work, your employer is not eligible to hold the grant, you're being overambitious or unrealistic, your research is not good value for money, you do not follow the guidance notes, your application is incomplete, or you miss a deadline, even by a minute for some funders. So the prerequisites for a successful grant application are that it is a successful sales pitch aimed at convincing a particular funder that your idea is important to them, your suggested approach will successfully deliver something meaningful, that what they get will be good value for money, you and your team are eligible for funding and competent to undertake the work, and you are able to write a well-crafted, understandable description of your work that will convince funders of all of those things.